Welcome back to Vote of Voice. Today we're talking about something that sounds very academic but is actually extremely personal. It's called social contract theory. Now, before you click away thinking this is a philosophy lecture, relax. This is about a simple question. Why do you obey government? Seriously. Like, why do you pay taxes? Why do you stop at red lights at 2 a.m. when absolutely no one is around? Why do you follow laws written by people you've never met? Most of us never signed anything that said, "Yes, I consent to be governed." There was no onboarding email, no click here to accept terms and conditions of citizenship. And yet, here we are, participating, complying, renewing licenses, filing paperwork, living inside a system of authority we did not personally design. That question, why authority is legitimate, is where social contract theory begins. Let's start with a thought experiment. Imagine there is no government, no police, no courts, no laws, no traffic signals, no tax forms, no building codes, no food safety inspections. At first, some people think freedom, and then you just give it about 48 hours. This scenario is what philosophers call the state of nature, end quote. It's basically humanity with no referee. Thomas Hobbes, writing in the 1600s, looked at this imaginary situation and said, absolutely not. He believed that without a central authority, life would be chaotic and violent. His famous description was that life would be solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. That is the most polite 1600s way of saying it would be a disaster. Hobbes thought that humans were self-interested, competitive, and fearful. Without rules, everyone would constantly worry about survival. You'd sleep with one eye open. You wouldn't invest in long-term plans. There'd be no stable trust. So Hobbes proposes a solution. People collectively agree to give up some freedom in exchange for security. You sacrifice the freedom to do whatever you want so that you don't have to constantly defend yourself from everyone else. In other words, authority is better than chaos. In Hobbes' world, you obey government because the alternative is worse. You don't obey because you love that authority. You obey because anarchy is exhausting. Now enter John Locke. Locke was one optimistic man. He was way more. He didn't think humans were constantly on the edge of violence. He believed people have natural rights such as life, liberty, and property. But here's the issue. Even if you have human rights, who enforces them? For example, if someone steals your property in the state of nature, what happens? You handle it yourself. That can escalate quickly. Locke argues that government exists to protect rights. It's not about suppressing chaos, it's about creating neutral enforcement. So in Locke's version, you obey government because it protects your rights. This is how we view liberalism. Where if you're a good person, you will do great in life. And you give up some natural rights. And here's the important part about this social contract. So if a government fails to protect those rights, then it will lose their legitimacy. That's where the idea of justified rebellion comes from. So Hobbes said, obey because chaos is worse. Locke says, obey because government protects your rights, and if it doesn't, you can challenge it. Then we get Rousseau. Rousseau says, legitimate authority comes from the general will, end quote, the collective will of the people as a whole. This is where things get complicated. If the majority supports a law you personally dislike, are you still free? Rousseau would say yes, because you are part of the collective body creating those laws. You're obeying yourself, in a sense. That's a very elegant idea. It's also slightly uncomfortable, because in practice, people don't always feel like they're obeying themselves. So now step back. All three thinkers are trying to answer the same question. What makes power legitimate? Is it fear of chaos? Is it protection of rights? Is it collective self-rule? And here's where it gets interesting. Did any of us actually consent? There was no literal contract, no signature, no ceremony where you turned 18 and signed a scroll based on the age of the majority. So philosophers introduced the idea of tacit consent, the idea that by living within a society, using its roads, benefiting from its institutions, you are implicitly agreeing to its authority. But critics of it push back. If I'm born into a country and leaving requires money, visas, relocation, language shifts, is staying really consent? Or is it just practical necessity? And that question becomes very real when trust in institution declines. When people say the system is rigged or the government doesn't represent me, what they're really saying is the social contract feels broken. Civil disobedience movements are built on this logic. Aren't rejecting all authority. They're arguing that authority violated its side of the deal. Think about it. Why do democracies obsess over elections? Because elections renew legitimacy. They symbolically refresh consent. Why do governments care or not care so much about approval ratings? Because authority that loses belief becomes unstable. No government can rely purely on force because force can be expensive and compliance is cheaper. Legitimacy is what makes compliance possible. And here's the subtle brilliance of social contract theory. It turns power into something conditional. Authority isn't just because I said so, end quote. It becomes, end quote, because we agreed. Even if that agreement is theoretical, now let's make this practical. Why do you stop at a red light at 2 a.m. when no cars around? It's not fear of police every time. It's internalized legitimacy. You believe in the system enough to follow it voluntarily. That's social contract theory in action. Why do people protest? Because what they believe the contract has been violated. Why do revolutions happen? Because enough people believe the contract has completely collapsed. The social contract may not be literal, but it's powerful as framework. It gives us language to evaluate government. When government protects rights, maintains order, and reflects public will, we say it's legitimate. When it fails, we say it's corrupt, authoritarian, or broken, and very elitist. That language is everywhere in politics. We don't just always realize we're using 17th and 18th century philosophy when we say it, like separation of church and state or separation of powers. Or now here's the real uncomfortable question. Is the social contract real, or is it just a story we tell to justify authority? Maybe it's both. It may not be something you signed, but it's something you participate in daily. Every time you follow a law, every time you vote, every time you criticize the government, you are operating within logic of the contract. So next time you're frustrated with politics, remember, the debate isn't just about policy, it's about legitimacy. It's about whether the invincible agreement between citizens and authority still feels intact. And that's not abstract philosophy. That's the foundation of modern political life. So, yep, that's how social contract theory is. Thank you for watching Vote and Voice. Make sure to subscribe and listen on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, as that's where I'll be posting my podcasts. I'll see you next time, next week. Thank you.